Let's take a look at the Jehovah's Witnesses website, see if they have anything going on right now. I'm really waiting for the kids' cartoon they do about the pandemic. Let's see. Is God responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic? The Bible's answer may surprise you. Well then, this article can't possibly let us down, right? Let's get into it. Before we get into it, I just want to mention a couple of things. If you've already heard this before, then skip forward about 30 seconds. Here's a little fun fact for you. If you're on a PC or a Mac, hit the L button 3 times. If you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring or my Etsy store. I sell all kinds of cool stuff on there. Mostly it's 3D printed game and controller stands, but I also sell some signs to stave away the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I sell these dumpster fire candle holders. I sell green, blue, and black, and I sell plain-faced ones or 2021s. I have a bunch of other stuff on there, so give it a look. I might have something that catches your eye. Okay, with all that being said, let's take a look at the Jehovah's Witnesses website. Jehovah's Witnesses came out and made a public statement about the pandemic a while back. They basically said what you'd expect. A governing body member, Tony Morris, pretty much said to buckle up because it's gonna get worse. But when pressed, they made a public declaration that this is not the beginning of Armageddon. When Armageddon starts, it's gonna happen a lot faster and a lot harder than this, which is disturbing. This came on pretty quick. Either way, they said this is a foreshadowing of what's to come. They're honestly doing their best to protect their people by stopping all conventions, public gatherings, and door knocking, which is good, but they're not completely in the clear with this. They've said and done some pretty questionable stuff through it too, which I've covered a little bit on my main channel and my podcast over the past few months. Somebody asked me on the podcast when I thought Jehovah's Witnesses would get back to door knocking. And here's my answer. I think they're prepared to wait this out for as long as it takes. When I was a young Jehovah's Witness many years ago, we had something called the book study group. It was basically a sleeper cell. When Armageddon starts and religion is outlawed, you're supposed to go to your book study group. Like 15 or 20 people meet at somebody's house once a week, study a Jehovah's Witness book for an hour, and fraternize. Eat cheese platters, chit-chat, that kind of thing. Well, they changed it a while back. They aren't called book study groups anymore. They're called service groups. And the book study thing they used to do takes place at the Kingdom Hall now. But since the pandemic hit, Jehovah's Witnesses have basically gone underground. They don't really have to hide from the public like they're being persecuted, so they're still counting hours spreading the good word by writing letters to people and getting on social media to stick their nose in random people's business, that kind of thing. But they're meeting online and everything. I think they're prepared to make this permanent until it's safe to come out or until Armageddon starts. Okay, with that context, let's take a look at this Jehovah's Witnesses article. Is God responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic? The Bible's answer may surprise you. Honestly, no answer they could give would surprise me. There are basically one of 3 explanations for this from a Christian extremist's perspective. Either they're going to find a justification for why God's not doing anything to stop it, God has nothing to do with it, and it's just humans' poor treatment of nature, or it's divine retribution. Let's find out which one. Let's give it a read. Quote, "The Bible foretold that pestilences, aka widespread diseases including pandemics, would occur during the last days. Such pandemics are not divine retribution or punishment from God. In fact, by means of his kingdom, God will soon put an end to all health problems, including pandemics." Here's the first subheading. Did the Bible foretell pandemics? The Bible does not mention specific pandemics or diseases such as COVID-19, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, or the Spanish flu, but it does foretell pestilences and deadly plague. These events are part of the sign of the last days, also referred to as the conclusion of the system of things. Okay, so it sounds like they're going with the God's not ready yet explanation, a cold comfort to people who are suffering now. The clock is ticking. Get to work if you're gonna do it. Numbers are racking up every second of every minute of every hour of every day. Anyways, here's our first problem. Pandemics have been happening practically since the dawn of time. What makes this different from the Spanish flu? I haven't looked it up, but I'd be willing to bet that they said something similar in 1918. They were still on their end times prediction kick at the time. In fact, it was in full swing. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's read the next section. It says, quote, "Has God ever punished people with sickness? The Bible reports a few occasions when God uses sickness to punish people. For example, he caused some individuals to have leprosy. However, these isolated incidents were not indiscriminate pandemics that spread to innocent people. Rather, such events were specific judgments on individuals who had clearly rebelled against God. Well then, I find that explanation fascinating. Maybe he didn't indiscriminately take people out with leprosy like that, but he supposedly indiscriminately took everybody out when he had Noah build an ark and load 2 of every animal on it, including polar bears from the North Pole and penguins from the South Pole. So there's that. But I guess he hasn't done it with illness, right? Just with a boat. Oh, and the Midianites. Almost forgot about them. He had his people take them out too. But he'd never do it with an illness. That's just too much. What kind of monster do you take him for? Let's continue. Here's the next section. Quote, are today's pandemics punishment from God? No. Some people claim that God is using pandemics and other sickness to punish people today. However, the Bible does not support that claim. Why not? For one thing, some of God's worshipers, both past and present, have been plagued with sickness. The faithful man Timothy, for example, suffered frequent cases of sickness, but the Bible does not say that this was a sign of God's disfavor. Likewise, today, some faithful servants of God become sick or contract diseases. Oftentimes, these individuals were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Moreover, the Bible teaches that God's time to punish the wicked has not yet arrived. Rather, we're living in a day of salvation, a time when God is extending a warm invitation to all humans to draw close to him and be saved. One way he tends that invitation is by means of the global preaching work with a positive message, the good news of the kingdom, unquote. Wow, that was a lot. Notice they said, moreover, the Bible teaches that God's time to punish the wicked has not yet arrived. What they actually mean is the governing body teaches that God's time to punish the wicked has not yet arrived. They could declare it over any day now. I'm just waiting for it. It's gonna get interesting when they finally do. The governing body has made a ton of end times predictions. They made a bunch of them in the late 1800s and early 1900s. They even named specific dates. By 1925, after like their 50th failed prediction, they learned better than to name specific dates. Now they stick to ambiguous time frames. Like before the last person baptized and anointed before 1914 dies, the end will come. It's long past that time now, obviously, since 1914 was well over 100 years ago. So they had to extend it by saying, well, the word generation means anybody who was alive during the lifetimes of the people who were baptized and anointed before 1914. They can only extend it so far, but based on their current extensions, I'd guess they have about another 25 years before they have to modify it again. But either way, when the governing body is truly convinced that the end is here, they say their message is going to, quote, change from one of good news to judgment. So basically, instead of knocking on people's doors and trying to bring them into the religion, they're going to continue knocking on people's doors and say, you're fucked and there's nothing you can do about it. I have to say, that's going to be a fascinating psychological experiment, but I seriously worry for their safety when they start doing that. Hopefully the governing body never decides the end is here. Hopefully they just keep extending the date and making bigger and bigger fools of themselves instead of putting other people's lives at risk. Anyways, here's the next section. Quote, will pandemics ever end? Yes, the Bible foretells a time in the near future when no one will be sick. Under the rule of his kingdom, God will cure all health problems. He will do away with suffering, pain, and death, and he will bring back to life those who have died so that they can enjoy good health here on earth under perfect conditions. This is a little trick Jehovah's Witnesses like to pull. They structure their articles to address problems or fears that they know affect the majority of their readers or listeners. Then they take the opportunity to make the fear even stronger, and finally they tell them the only way to avoid it is by joining their religion. Look, I'm an atheist. I think religion is ridiculous. Everything about it. And it's been a destructive force in the lives of billions of people over the millennia. But if you're going to join a religion, I would recommend finding one other than Jehovah's Witnesses. It's an exceptionally destructive group that I've been talking about for years. There are less destructive ones out there. Find one of those. Or just don't. Like me. I'm way better off now than I was when I was religious. Anyways, that's all I've got for you. As I said before, if you like what I do and you want to see me continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, there's Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check me out on Teespring, or you can check me out on Etsy. I have a store where I sell all kinds of interesting stuff. Mostly it's 3D printed game stands, but I also sell these 2020 dumpster fire candle holders, or just regular dumpster fire candle holders. And I sell these signs. If you want to keep Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons from knocking on your door, put these out front. Jehovah's Witnesses aren't afraid of anything, except for apostates. And you don't have to be an ex-Jehovah's Witness to be apostate. The term applies to anybody critical of the religion. So if you want to keep them away, then consider getting one of these signs. All links can be found in the description and the pinned comment as always. Okay, thanks for watching, guys.